Right, we are joined in Dubai. It's one of the hottest summer days relatively that we've had in Seattle, and my wife was saying it feels like a desert here. So I I feel some kinship, but nowhere near the heat blast you're dealing with. Welcome, Adam Hickman.
Hey, Stefan.
And you're one of the just wonderfully active community builders in EPS and country collecting. And this is, I'm ashamed to admit, the first time we've actually spoken other than chats and messages. So this is a pleasure for me to welcome you here late at night in Dubai.
Yeah, it's still touching 40 degrees at 11 p.m. So it's quite uncomfortable.
And we won't spend the whole time talking about lockdown, but I guess I don't really have a sense of, say I was in Hong Kong in January, and I used to live there and study there, and I knew how small the living conditions were. My impression of Dubai is I love to walk cities, and it's not a very walkable place. How has it felt, and what has it been like the past few months to navigate? What have you been able to do? What haven't you been able to do?
Well, everything's completely back to normal now. But I mean, we went into full lockdown very, very early, and it was a 24-hour lockdown. So we were allowed to leave our apartments once every 2 days for a period of 30 minutes, and we had to apply for a government-based permit to leave the household. So it was pretty strict, and if you were looking outside your balcony, you could see workers kind of disinfecting and spraying the streets. So it was very, very early in comparison to other countries. And then things slowly started to improve, but now full normality has been restored. The city's also open for tourism as of the 7th, so last week. So everything seems to just be back to normal, really.
Oh, that's incredible. And let's talk about normal. I think there's a lot of interest in the expat lifestyle. I understand you've been in Dubai for 6 years, and I think there's pros and cons to picking a place that has a lot of expats and expat infrastructure, and places that have very little of it. And the grizzled veterans of every place always seem to like what it was 3 or 5 years prior.
Yeah.
So talk about Dubai in 2020 as an expat destination.
Yeah, I mean, it's got its pros and cons like everywhere. I don't particularly like the heat. So it's probably a terrible place to be on that basis. But I mean, overall, it's a great city. Obviously, the income is tax-free. So that's a big plus point. It's a very central hub to travel from. But I think people are still under the stigma with Dubai that it's how it was sort of 15 years ago, where there aren't really any clubs, and women can't walk around sort of holding hands with guys, and they can't wear skirts. Whereas certainly in my 6 years here, it's not been like that at all. But perhaps it was kind of, speaking to friends of mine that have been here 15 to 20 years, it was very much like that in that particular era. But I guess it's just stereotyping. People still think it's like that. But the heat is the biggest gripe for me, to be honest.
One thing I've been fascinated on my visits is just seeking refuge from the heat. In the malls, for instance, is the people watching, and the just even the fashion, the differences of traditional dress from around the region that you see. There's an image of women being heavily covered in that, but there's such a vast, there's metal plates on different faces and different pattern. There's all different levels of display and textiles. It's really fascinated me.
Yeah, if you go to the beaches, you'll still see bikini-clad women of many different nationalities. Everything's very open. But if you go sort of a short 45-minute flight to sort of Doha in Qatar, it's a little bit more conservative. Then you obviously go to Kuwait and Saudi. Dubai does tend to differ a lot in comparison in terms of it's very, very open.
It's been some years, well, I don't know, maybe 8 years since I've actually been in Dubai, and it seemed like at the time Sharjah was the hot spot, the culture stuff, the art scene, the new restaurants. Is that still true, or is the hot spot moved somewhere entirely different?
Yeah, it's moved a little bit, but Sharjah is still there. People tend to go there if they prefer something a little bit different and a little bit sort of how things once were. Then people would go to Sharjah. I live in the marina, so overlooking the water in Dubai Marina. So I mean, that's been nice to kind of as things have been getting back to normal. There's 8 kilometers of uninterrupted footpath around the water, so it's good to kind of ride a bike or go for a walk. But now it's the weather's just too disgusting. You've got I mean, it hit 51 degrees at midday today, and you've got humidity with that. So it's pretty intense.
When people say a place like, say, New York is an immigrant city, I'm feeling like there's, the foreign-born population might be high by many standards, but it's nothing like the inverted sense of, where and when do you actually see a native-born local in a city like Dubai? So I'm really curious about that feel. My expat days were in China, where I was always very, very clear that I was one of a very small group, but it's flipped around for you all.
Yeah, it's the exact opposite. I mean, if you tend to go to the mall, maybe Dubai Mall, and hang around the Gucci and the Prada stores, you'll start seeing a few locals there if you wait around long enough. But I mean, there's under 10% of the entire city population is locals.
And you say you're an adrenaline junkie, and back from my different attempts to get to places like Socotra, I got on various hiking group lists and different expat activity groups in Dubai and around Emirates. It seems like there's a lot on offer. So where do you get your fix locally, and for people that want to sample the region? Dubai is open now, so what can they do adrenaline wise?
Yeah, locally, from an adrenaline point of view, I wish there was more. To be honest, I mean, you've got sort of you've got your skydiving. Obviously, skydiving over the Palm. Palm Jumeirah is a popular spot. I'd say that's one of the best in the world, just in terms of the view, seeing the man-made palm as you're heading towards the ground. There's a desert campus as well. There's indoor skydiving. There's a couple of buildings you can kind of hang off and abseil, but there's nothing major. I kind of go overseas for that. I'm trying to work my way through the top 10 highest bungee jumps in the world. So that's one of the lists, but I have so many lists I'm trying to work through. I like an organized list, as I'm sure many people do.
Oh, we'll get into those. You mentioned indoor skydiving, and near my home in Seattle, we've driven by a place a number of times and never really investigated that. I mean, is it fun? Is it gimmicky? What?
Yeah, I mean, it's just essentially a powerful wind tunnel, and it's more fun. You don't get anywhere near the buzz when you're actually skydiving. But it's good if you're learning to skydive yourself, in terms of learning the techniques and learning how to control the movements. It's used a lot for that. You get a lot of celebs that go there. When they come over, they tend to hang around at the wind tunnel. My friend bumped into Will Smith there. He visits Dubai a lot. And I had another friend who was in the plane jumping over the palm with one of those Kardashian people. I get confused with them. There's so many of them, but one of those. But the wind tunnel is okay, but it's just, if people do it, they're not expecting the buzz of an actual skydive.
So of an actual skydive, a number of the activities you've mentioned, I've hesitated doing because I don't want the headline to be, it just seems like it seems gratuitous to me, but yet I know how much fun. I mean, I see that broad smile on your face. So let's talk skydiving.
I mean, that was actually the first thing I did to get over my fear of heights. You know, when I was younger, one of the first kind of trips I went on, I went to Paris, and I have to be honest, I couldn't even go past the base level of the Eiffel Tower. Literally, like the first level where the legs of the Eiffel Tower start. I was just shaking and couldn't even go up any higher than that. And then I went to Vegas in my early 20s. I think I'd just watched the first Hangover movie where they're in Caesar's Palace. Yeah, literally broke up with my girlfriend and boarded a flight to Vegas within 48 hours of watching the movie. And you know, I went to the top of the Stratosphere Tower, and I missed out on doing the thrill rides on the top there, again, because I was just so petrified. So it was actually a skydive that actually got me over my fear. And then I've just never looked back. Literally, the minute I jumped out of the plane, it just felt like a burden had been released in terms of like a fear, and now it's trying to stop me from doing anything, whether it's jumping off a building or skydiving or paragliding, you know, whatever it may be.
So what did it take to get you on that plane and taking that step?
Yeah, I knew I just needed to do something to try and, I guess, whenever I've got a fear, I just try and conquer it head on. And I thought, you know, some people said, oh, you should try therapy or to be hypnotized, etc. But I thought, you know what, I'll jump out of a plane and see if that works. And just never look back. I would recommend a skydive for anybody who's not done one, really. For a buzz, there's nothing like it, like the feeling of the free fall.
Are there particular destinations for skydiving? I mean, can think it's available widely around the world. Are there particular spots known for their organization, their safety, their beauty, however you want to judge it?
Yeah, I mean, without sounding biased, Dubai is extremely good for skydiving, but it's because the Skydive Dubai, the center, is owned by the Prince of Dubai. So he's pumped a lot of wealth into sort of making world-class facilities, you know, exemplary safety record, all of the best facilities, the equipment. The cost is very, very low in comparison to costings of skydives elsewhere. You get your fully edited video and the photos included in the package, whereas sometimes you do a skydive jump, I've done others around the world, and it's like, okay, the skydive's 200, and then it's another 250 if you want the video and the photos. It's all included in. He gets sort of world-class sort of video editing people in on that, so it's great for that. And I just think you'll struggle to beat the view of the Palm, you know, when you're free falling. But there's a lot of other great spots. Switzerland's very good. You know, you've got a lot of scenic and picturesque lakes. Australia is very good. I believe the one in Byron Bay is the highest you can jump from without using oxygen.
Huh. And so help me understand, when I hear skydiving, my first thought is the jumping out of a plane. It sounds like there's also jumps from fixed locations or towers and such.
No, it's always a plane when it's skydiving. When it's bungee jumping, it's from like a crane or a tower or sometimes a bridge. Because I did what I thought was the world's highest bungee jump off the Macau Tower in China, in Macau. That was labeled everywhere as the world's highest bungee, so I thought I'd start with that one. Then through research, I found there's actually one in the US in an area called Colorado Springs off a bridge, which is higher. So I'll have to head over there at some point. But the one in Macau was a great buzz, especially because you're jumping off of a tower and you're seeing the rooftops of skyscrapers below you. So so that's pretty cool. And then
the typical bungee jump would be about how much height, and then how much would this Macau one be?
Normally, average bungee is anywhere between 300 to 400 feet. So, like the one off the bridge in Victoria Falls, you know, that's around 300. which, don't get me wrong, is still high and daunting when you're up there and you're standing on the ledge. But the one in Macau is 780 feet, so it's over double. So yeah, it's quite high. And then I did the highest bridge bungee jump in the South Africa, the Blue Crans Bridge. That was actually my first bungee that I did. That's kind of where I got the buzz from, and became hooked on that.
Are there things you look for to, I mean, say I've been to the Victoria Falls one, and it's a daunting sight, and I'm curious, how do you evaluate is a jump safe? Are you doing research beforehand? You're looking at things on the day of? What are the signals, and have you ever backed out of one that didn't seem right?
Yeah, I mean, there is like with skydiving and with bungee jumping, there is like a bungee jump directory, if you like a website that is believed to be an approved source, and that's where you can essentially check the back test the safety records of them. But I guess it's never completely safe. There's always that element of fear. I think the one in Victoria Falls off the bridge, that bungee cord snapped a couple of years back, and the woman, it was a woman, the cord snapped, she fell into the river, and actually survived. But there was like crocodile infested waters that she fell in. I think she just got lucky. But generally I try not to let it put me off. But I'll try and jump in. And thankfully, the top 10 in the world are all in reputable countries. Switzerland, Austria, the US, China, South Africa. They've all got sort of very, very high standards and good safety records.
So mentioning that list, AJ is asking, how many bungee jumps have you done on your list?
Hey, AJ. I've done 5 of the 10. So I've done around 15 bungee jumps, but only 5 off of the list of the top 10 highest. So I'm halfway through that.
And when you do one of these, you like kids on a roller coaster, you run back around and want another go at it, or is one jump enough at these?
Well, coincidentally, the first one I did off the Blue Crans Bridge in South Africa was the first ever bungee I'd done, the highest bridge bungee. And the minute kind of the safety guys came down on their harness and pulled me back up to the top of the bridge, I immediately paid the guy to jump again, so I could jump again before I even took my harness off. So then I did a second jump backwards, came back up on the harness, and then did a third jump, which is called the running man, where you essentially don't jump, you just run directly off the bridge. So they tie the bungee cord a little bit differently. They tie it around your waist instead of around your feet, so you've got sort of movement to be able to run. But yeah, there was just no buzz like it. I think a little bit different compared to a skydive, because a skydive, to some extent, you're strapped to an instructor, and it's down to them to actually jump, and you just go with it. But from a bungee jump perspective, you're there standing on the end of the bridge or on the end of the tower, and it's down to you to actually take the plunge and jump. But I actually prefer the backwards bungees. I don't know. I just seem to get more of a buzz from it. I think it's because you can't see the horizon in front of you. So I found the backwards ones pretty cool.
Is there? So you've mentioned a buzz. Is there these moments of insight, the light flashing before your eyes? You realize you're going to move to a new country, or is it really just that overwhelming thrill that's coming through?
It's normally just in the build-up, to be honest. Like if it's a bungee off a bridge, it's like the daunting walk across the bridge, and then you're kind of waiting in line, which is always a little bit nerve-wracking. But then and you do get that second kind of second thought when you are standing on the edge. But then the minute you jump, it's hard to explain the feeling. But it's just such a thrill, and just like bursting with adrenaline. I'm sure for anyone who's done one, I've not met many people who've just done one bungee jump and never jumped again.
Jack is suggesting we should think about jumping off BC Tower in Bogota, highest building in LATAM. Bring some attention to the area.
If it's an actual bungee jump, but if it's Jack turning up with a rope, then I'll skip that one. But I'll bear it in mind, because Jack's going to kindly be my tour guide when I make it to Colombia. So
fantastic! I heard about the wonderful EDIC trip that he organized. I had a spousal harmony trip conflict, so I was not able to join, and I've heard delightful things for many on that. And Mehul was asking about the back bungee jump that you addressed. So you mentioned 3 different types, but forward, backward, and the running. Are there any more to the set? Or are those the main?
I mean, there is one other, which is called the flying squirrel. But I guess it's similar to the Running Man, but you just kind of I won't make the noise, but you're supposed to kind of jump like a squirrel and just go like But they're generally the only ones I know. But typically, you know, the front bungee and the back jumpy are the preferred ones.
I guess people might try like a handstand or something, but then it probably wouldn't be much of a different effect, other than if that's their thing.
Yeah, a lot of them have kind of stopped allowing handstands, because you tend to find you're not jumping far enough out.
Oh, okay.
So if you just jump very close to the ledge, there's a greater risk of the bungee cord coming up and smacking you in the face. So they do encourage you to actively, you know, jump outwards, as if you're jumping off a diving board, for example.
Yeah, I'm thinking of the Olympics when they do those like platform backward facing ones, where it always looks like they're gonna smash their chin on the platform.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And Mehul asked a follow-up: are you looking to jump using flysuit? And I'm not familiar with flysuit.
Flysuit? I think essentially where you can jump without a bungee rope, and then you open up your arms, and it's a flysuit that you then fly in. It's popular to kind of fly within mountain ranges. I've seen it on sort of Red Bull advertisements a lot. But I have limits, and I'd much rather have a cord attached to me.
That sounds like, yeah, I've seen, wasn't there one a year or so ago in China at Sanqingshan, where the guy was trying to thread the needle through a very narrow rock pass, I think, with that suit. And I don't want to look it up. I can't remember if it had a good ending or not for him, but I think the answer might have been no. Yeah. So they're saying the no rope stuff. Yeah. So there are some limits. And but when we were talking about trips to perhaps discuss, it leads into Devjit's comment about what was a greater adrenaline rush, skydiving or peeing off the side of the ore train in Mauritania.
I'd definitely say the skydive was the bigger adrenaline rush, but I guess I've got Anya to thank, who's a good travel buddy of mine. She was essentially the iron ore in the train was extremely high, so there wasn't a great deal of space between the top of the carriage and the iron ore. So I was kind of kneeling, peeing off the side, and Anya was kindly holding on to me from behind in case we were to suddenly hit a jolt in the track. So she was on P duty with me there.
You said in prior episodes, Anya and Jenna have taken your iron ore, Devjit your Sao Tome, Ryan Gazder has taken stories. So we've of course we want your side of some of these stories. But I know you have a passion about Antarctica, and I don't think any of them have stolen your Antarctica stories. So let's start over to Antarctica.
Yeah, so I went to Antarctica in December 2018. So yeah, I guess just over a year ago, a year and a half ago, and yeah, by far one of the best trips I've ever done. I expected to be more wowed over the sort of seeing the colonies of penguins and being within a couple of meters of humpback whales. But you know, what wowed me the most was actually probably the landscapes. You know, the landscapes in Antarctica were just absolutely amazing, and the sunsets as well. Obviously, that time of year, I mean, the sunsets at sort of 1 a.m. and then by sort of 1:20 a.m. You know, the sun's rising again. So, but it was just breathtaking. The landscapes were.
What was the itinerary? What the arrangements, logistics that you chose for this?
Yeah, so I went with a Canadian company called G Adventures. Perhaps they seem pretty well known. There's only a handful of companies that obviously do Antarctica, but the reason I chose to go with G Adventures, you know, I've spoken to a couple of people who've been with them already, but the main reason was actually due to their ship size. You know, their ship size is they only have room for 130 passengers, okay. which in terms of a cruise ship is you know, is relatively small. So it meant that the ship was able to get sort of into the harder to reach areas where perhaps larger ships couldn't. You know, where I have a friend who went with Quark expeditions, and sometimes there was a few scenarios where they couldn't get the ship directly to where they needed to get to. So a lot of them had to kind of jump on Zodiac rafts. There was a bit of that as well, obviously, and that's part of kind of the you know, part of the attraction really when you're going on the Zodiac rafts to the mainland. But yeah, G Adventures was who I went with. The only thing I found with them is, as with all companies, that the price differed a huge amount. And typically, when you're dining in the evening, the cost of the trip always comes up as a talking point around the dining table. And yeah, I kind of wish I wasn't asked first. I mean, this was a 12-day full board trip, and I paid $4,500 US total, and that was staying in a triple cabin, so with two other people, and was very, very lucky because two people who booked on the boat failed to show up as the boat was departing, and one of those two people was in my cabin, so it ended up being two people to a 3-person cabin. But you know, some people had paid upwards to kind of $9,000-$10,000 for exactly the same trip, the same cabin class, you know, and they were same dates as they were on my ship. So yeah, that was a little bit disappointing seeing how much the price varies. It was huge.
And how did you shop around? You got lucky? You subscribed to newsletters? How did you pull this off?
Yeah, I mean, I've got a friend that works for a company in London called the Flight Centre. Yeah, so they're a pretty big flight network. They have a partnership with G Adventures as one of their external companies that they recommend. So I had him kind of scouting a few deals for me. To be fair, there was a little bit of his staff discount on there that took another 10% off. I then had a further 5% loyalty discount with G Adventures as I'd done a past trip with them. But I thought $4,500 was exceptionally good value for 12 days fully board. That was with all the kind of added extras that you can be sold in terms of sort of with the kayaking and the camping on a glacier, etc. So it was a very good price.
Yeah, it sounds like that's probably half of what I was guessing. So that sounds in the ballpark of where the market is.
Yeah, but
you found a great deal.
Yeah, but I mean, you know, Quark are very, very good as well. I know a few people who've been with them, and they have a very good reputation as well. I just wanted a smaller
Mhm.
ship as possible, and it meant there was a fair few kind of scientists and geologists, and there was a penguin specialist on board, a bird
Mm.
specialist, glacier specialist. So it was great to kind of tune into their seminars and their lectures sort of in
Mhm.
between when you're sailing from one point to the next.
And this is my ignorance on this. Are there a lot of the activities that are additional charge, or is it all inclusive in terms of the stuff you can do off the ship?
Well, the kayaking is $950
Okay.
to kayak, so that's an extra $1,000 there. The camping overnight on a glacier is another $450.
Mm.
So there are a few extras that they get. The polar plunge is the only one that's essentially free. So that's coming towards the end of the trip. You can essentially jump off of the boat. You can jump off of the side door of the ship
Mm.
directly into the polar water. That's free of charge, but obviously that's not everyone's everyone's cup of tea. Jumping into ice cold water.
I'm guessing it's your cup of tea, or not?
Yeah, I did that one twice as well, but more so because the first time around when I jumped, my GoPro froze the
Mhm.
minute it hit the water. I assume it was maybe the cold, so I had to bargain and sweet talk the doctor on board because she didn't want me to jump a second time just due to the changes in the temperature. But I mean, you're attached to like a rope harness anyway.
Mhm.
So they do make sure you're only in the water for a very short space of time. But it was again a buzz, but a cold one in
And
that
were
respect.
any of the activities you paid for that, in hindsight, it was like that maybe wasn't worth the financial stretch?
Well, the only one I didn't kind of do in the end was I didn't camp overnight on the glacier.
Mm.
That was something I should have organized before I left. I didn't realize that would be so popular. Whereas there was only a certain sort of quota of people they would take on a Zodiac raft to camp on a glacier.
Mm.
It was right next to the ship that you're obviously staying on overnight in a cabin, but obviously it's still the whole cool aspect of we've overnight camped in Antarctica, which obviously not many people can claim that. So that's the only one I didn't really get involved in. A couple of people who I know on board that did that said $450 was quite steep.
Mm.
But I mean, for me, if ever I'm anywhere traveling, I'm not great when it comes to budgeting for that sort of thing. It just I see I may only be in a place once. I'll just fork out whatever is necessary for those kind of experiences.
Mm. Mm. Fantastic. Yeah, I'm envious of that experience. My very short Antarctica trip has been very different. That I'm looking to emulate a trip like you've taken. Not sure quite when it will be at this point. You've got a quest for 197. Tell us where you are on that quest, and plans interrupted, but we'll see when you can resume.
Yeah, so currently on 139 UN as it stands, and then a further 12 added on top of that. So 139 at the minute. So I'm making good progress, but as with everyone globally, I guess COVID has caused a bit of a problem there. I was due to depart on quite a lengthy trip midway through the pandemic, which was covering off the remaining countries I had in Central Africa.
Mm.
As I'd always said, I want Africa. If I exclude Antarctica for a second, I actually want Africa to be the first continent that I fully complete.
Oh, okay.
Before all of the others. That's just because I do see a growing trait where a lot of people do seem to be left with a handful of countries, and they're all on the African continent. So I just thought I'd try and do it a little bit different. So I've kind of held off completing other continents, as I'd like
Uh-huh.
Africa to to be the first. So I'm on 41 of 54. So I've got another 13 left. I've got 6 kind of in that central patch. And then I have some nice ones in sort of the southern region. You know, Botswana. I haven't done Namibia, Botswana, Zambia, Malawi, Mozambique. Ones that are normally the easy pickings. But that helped because December just gone. I took a 5-week trip with Zuzana Berensky, who's a member of EPS, and we did the entire coast of West Africa. So that was a great experience, but also kind of, I guess, a little bit of a relief to get that kind of done on the west, where it's not the easiest area to travel from a logistics point of view, as I'm sure many people have experienced. So I was a little bit disappointed that Central Africa trip came during the pandemic, though, because it would have only left 6 countries in Africa that were all in the southern region.
So part of the what Debji calls the peanut gallery that's watching right now. what West Africa, Central Africa, one trip you had, one trip interrupted. They're both ones that you know, in a host of respects are challenging for many travelers to think about what they want to do, how they want to put it together. In terms of your particular interest, what did you find? What attracted you in these countries, and that others may seek to replicate or put a new spin on travels they may take?
Yeah, I mean, the main priority with West Africa is I wanted to delve quite deep into the countries. I'm not really one for just kind of popping in, spending 2 days in the capital and then leaving. So, you know, I got quite stuck in, especially in the Guinea countries. So in Guinea, normally people just kind of you know, do the quick stop in Conakry just to kind of tick it off. But we did Guinea-Bissau and Guinea overland together. So Guinea, we spent sort of over a week going through you know, through the highlands. You know, it was a stunning, beautiful area. I picked up some great tips from Debji on that as well. He's literally the oracle. The guy knows everything, even to countries he's never even stepped foot in. But I'm sure everyone has figured that out in EPS over the years. So in Guinea, there's some amazing waterfalls. But you know, it's not the easiest to kind of travel around in terms of the roads aren't particularly great as well, as they aren't in a lot of West Africa. I found them very, very good in Senegal, but then sort of in Guinea-Bissau, Guinea, Liberia, you know, they weren't particularly great. But yeah, the waterfalls were a highlight, and I guess just kind of you know, immersing in the culture. Sierra Leone, there was a lot on the history side that I wanted to kind of you know, get involved in, because obviously there's you know, there's British colonial roots there on that side, and Sierra Leone was fascinating to explore as well. The only country I didn't actually enjoy on the west was the Gambia, if I'm honest. It was, you know, I'm one of these that really tries to I guess see the best in every country and go in very, very open-minded. But the Gambia, zero interest in it, and couldn't wait to leave. I just didn't see any main kind of draw to the country or any main tourism attractions worth seeing or points of interest. It was just typically seeing young local guys with grandmas from the UK, the US, Australia. It's like, I guess, the polar opposite of Thailand. Everyone knows how it is in Thailand. You tend to get the you tend to get the older generation of the male society with you know, with young local women, you know, young enough to be their daughter or granddaughter in some cases. But the Gambia is the polar opposite. It's very, very strange to see. But I just found nothing of interest there. But other than that, I very much enjoyed the West Coast, actually.
Yeah, fantastic. And I'm thinking I read through the Brat guide for the Gambia, and it's one of those that I found that guidebooks and travel writers, if they haven't thought of something else, they'll say it's a birder's paradise, which is not. I'm not intending to knock birders. It's a fascinating hobby, but it's like it is the last resort when they haven't come up with something else to grab the headlines.
Yeah, I mean, there were a few people there actually that we kind of met on a day tour that were there specifically for bird watching. So it's definitely a thing there. But for me, as much as I like to photograph wildlife, I'd say there needs to be more than birds to for me to be drawn to the country. But you know, perhaps other people have had good experiences in the Gambia. I found the beaches very average as well, and I thought that was one thing that I thought could possibly be a highlight. I thought, you know, maybe there's nice beaches there, but then they were put to shame by Sierra Leone. I found the beaches in
Mhm.
Sierra Leone. If you exclude kind of the island nations in Africa, like you know the Seychelles and the Maldives,
Mhm.
I'd go as far as saying the beaches in Sierra Leone are some of the best I've seen on the entire continent of Africa.
Oh, fantastic. And about Central Africa, that was a trip you planned and then interrupted. What were you seeing that was attracting you on paper?
Yeah, so part of that was with Debji, which was Burkina Faso. So I hadn't been there. We had a great itinerary planned there. That didn't go to plan. I was covering Ghana, but that was just going to be, I guess, the main sites like Accra, and then there's the I forget the name, Cape Coast. Yeah, there's Cape Coast, and there's a couple of stops in between there. And then with Car, it was obviously the you know the Pygmy village, and there's Boali waterfalls there as well. Car was going to be a relatively short stop of 3 days in comparison to the rest. But that's because you know Anya, who's a good friend of mine. I mean, I think her and I think Gina may have been on the same trip. They looked like they had a torrid time in Central African Republic. They did an overland trip covering Cameroon and Car, and yeah, they didn't exactly speak very highly of it. But I think they had a bad experience overall, partly to do with the tour operator. I think.
Hmm. Let's see. And speaking of Anya, so the peanut gallery is in full force. She's saying, tell us more about some of
Um,
your favorite activities while traveling. Any hidden talents like knowing every single word to every song by Venga Boys, Aqua, Shaggy, etc., that would be exposed
oh,
long road trip through the Albanian countryside.
oh, the shame. Yeah, I mean, Anya is probably the female clone of me in terms of as a person and the way she travels, the lists and the advanced PDF itinerary we kind of go by. But I think she's referring to yeah, I guess some people sing out loud in the shower. Anya and I do it in the car, traveling around Albania, and the Venga Boys is top of the list, followed by Shaggy. But Anya has a good voice. Sadly, I don't. So I make sure it's in very small gatherings when I bust out my car karaoke.
And how can I convince her to accept the invitation to be on this program because she has turned me down?
Yeah, with Anya, you need to. I don't know the right way of wording it. She needs to know she's the number one top priority pick. So, Stefan, if you're going out there to try and get Anya on, you need to maybe say, look, you know, she's in front of you know a good 20 to 30 other Chicago-based travelers. You know, then I'm sure she may give in to temptation. But Anya's like awesome to travel with, to be honest, and you know, she's got some amazing stories and some experiences as well. It was great to share the iron ore train experience with her. She's one of the few people who I tend to repeat countries for. Obviously, yeah, I mean, when you're looking at numbers and statistics, and if the goal is the 197, you do try to not repeat particular countries, but there are some companies that just kind of draw you there, and you keep going back to. I think last year I did 22 new countries, and I think 15 repeats, and I think 3 of those repeats were with Anya. But she's so awesome to travel with. You know, sometimes you've got to make exceptions. And that's the same with Ryan Gazda. I know he's EPS moderator. He's I guess one of the first people I started traveling with here in Dubai. Since I lived here, we crossed paths on a trip in Bangladesh, and that was my second time to Bangladesh actually. Just when I repeat a country, I try and make sure I'm covering off, I guess, new cities and have new experiences there. So I met Ryan there. So Ryan, Anya, Debjeet, and Susanna, they're 4 people on my list of 7 who I'm comfortable traveling with. I'm very picky over who I travel with, but I think it's because I'm perhaps quite a selfish traveler. If I'm going to visit a country, you know, if there's a list of 10, 15 things I want to see there, I will literally be hell-bent on covering that entire list. And if it means deviating from the list because somebody else wants to go somewhere that's not on the list, I'm not particularly great there. I'm like, look, you do your thing, I do my thing, and then we'll meet up for you know, for an evening meal in the evening. But the 4 of those are fantastic to travel with.
Yeah, one thing that surprised me with the EPS is I assumed that all of us are impossible to travel with each other and nobody can get along on their own. It's been interesting that there are ways for people with these similar, very intense goals to reach a meeting of minds and understanding to pull it off.
Yeah, especially living in so many different areas. I mean, I'm in the Middle East, Anya's in the US, Debjeet's in Joburg, Ryan and Susanna are here with me in the Middle East, but we always seem to have a knack of, you know, coordinating and meeting in different countries to share experiences, and then you cross paths with other EPS members that perhaps you don't always realize we're in the same location at the same time. I was in Benin with Debjeet and Zoo, and we bumped into AJ Peregrino. That was in Benin last year, so that was kind of a chance meet there. I think Anya picked up. We were in the same place at the same time. I guess the most random one, I was in West Africa on a flight from, I think it was Sierra Leone to Liberia, and I was flicking through my photos on my phone and looking through the iron ore train photos, and there was a couple behind me that oversaw my photo and said, "Oh, you know, I see you rode the train. What an amazing experience. You don't happen to be a member of EPS, do you?" And yeah, that was on a flight from, it was Mauritania back to Senegal. And that was a couple called Tim and Terry Meyer that are in EPS. You know, they do a lot of their traveling together. I think they're, you know, high 180s. Tim Meyer is very well traveled, and just a chance meeting that you happen to be sitting in the row in front of them on the plane. There's been a few other times I've bumped into people in airport lounges. So that's quite a popular meet point as well. But it's just you know, overall it's a fantastic community, and it's really opened up my eyes to traveling, and it's great to kind of bounce tips and ideas off of each other. And as we know, sometimes if you do put a small group together, you can significantly reduce the cost of some trips with local fixers that you're using, specifically in Africa, I would say.
Fantastic. And Debjeet is asking, all of these are very leading leading questions. So I know you have a great love for photography. Tell us a bit more about a few interesting situations you got into yourself while taking photos. So does this relate to your wanting all kinds of adrenaline rushes?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I do like to take photos, as I'm sure many travelers do, especially kind of wildlife and landscapes. Coincidentally, I've used kind of the lockdown period to sort through my travel photos, organize them, have a bit of a cull, get rid of a lot of photos that are not needed, back them all up on an external hard drive. Then there's a copy of that external hard drive in one kept in the UK and one kept here in the UAE, just so there's backups of backups. And yeah, I was noticing I was going through my Sri Lanka album, a country I've been to 5 times now, and there was a photo of me that my travel buddy took of me behind bars in a prison cell in Sri Lanka. Just temporary for a couple of hours. That was because I was snapping in a museum of all places that I wasn't supposed to be taking photos in. But I think, I don't know, I'm sure so many travelers have been there where, you know, there's places you go to or in buildings where photography is restricted. And I guess it always kind of spurs you on a little bit more, in my opinion. But on that,
I wouldn't be thinking that in a museum, if they said, if you get the sir or the tap on the shoulder, I wouldn't think that would become jail for even a few hours. I think it would be like you need to pay the $10 fee or whatever. So how does it escalate to you're in
absolutely
jail?
yeah. Somebody else there reported me, and then I was taken to like a local police station. I was put in a cell, and while I was in the cell, I had to write like an apology letter to the museum management. And you know, thankfully, I didn't pay a fine, but that was a random one I came across yesterday, looking through travel photos. But I won't leave it out. The one that Debjit is referring to is Debjit and I were on a trip in Nigeria, and we flew into Lagos, and we went on a local boat ride through, I guess, almost like a local stilt village, if you like, kind of a shanty town, Makoko, I think the name of it is, just on the outskirts of Lagos. And I think in some African countries, I'm sure a lot of people will agree, sometimes a phone is the best thing to take photos. It's small, it's discreet. But I think because I was rocking in there with my big Sony mirrorless camera, you know, we were going down this on this wooden boat through this stilt village, and then I don't think some of the locals took too kindly of me taking photos, even though it was essentially just of the river view. I wasn't zooming in on particular kind of locals there. But then a wooden boat was coming towards us. A local Nigerian guy jumped across from his wooden boat onto our wooden boat. You know, there was a bit of a standoff. He was trying to grab my camera. Yeah, it really wasn't pleasant at all. And then obviously your camera's like one of your prized possessions when you're traveling. I wasn't willing to let go. He wasn't willing to let go. In the end, our boat turned around. We went sort of back to where we'd taken the boat from. We rushed back to the car with our local fixer, and then we found our car was blocked in. It was barricaded by a bollard that someone had placed at the front of the car, and then there was a number of locals on motorcycles blocking us in behind the car. And we were at a bit of a standstill. Our fixer didn't know what to do. He was shaking like a leaf. He was panicking. You know, we locked the car doors, but then, you know, we had people on the front of the car, people on the back of the car, essentially just demanding money or demanding the camera. And then at this point, I was losing my shit because I don't think the local fixer was handling it particularly well. You know, Debjit, Mr. Cool, was very laid back, unwilling to part with any money. Whereas I was like literally like just wanting to get out of there. I was just like throwing money. I was just like, look, here's $200, just take it. I can't remember how it ended, but I think we may have paid a small amount of money. But then the bollards were removed. They're kind of the big concrete bollards that you'd see on the side of a motorway when there's maintenance work being done. So it was a huge concrete bollard. It was it just wasn't a particularly pleasant experience. And then I think Zuzana was with us. She spent the time getting out of the car and speaking to local women that were there, I think washing clothes or something. So it was kind of Debjeet, Mr. Cool, Zuzana immersing in with the locals, and me just wanting to throw dollar bills and get out of there. But I think it was because I was the one on the wooden boat that kind of had the confrontation with the local. So I guess I was a little bit more kind of heated up in comparison to the others.
Adrenaline is good adrenaline, or maybe there's a limit to it.
Yeah, that's kind of one I probably wouldn't repeat. If I had the choice. It was a shame because Nigeria offers a fair bit as a country to explore, but you have scenarios like that, and it's not one I'm rushing back to in a hurry.
I guess you could have tried breaking out in song with your other skills.
Yeah, but thankfully I've never really had too many issues whilst traveling. To be honest, it's always been relatively a safe experience. But I'm relatively kind of fast thinking, and I guess don't push limits too much when it comes to traveling in particular countries that are perhaps a little bit hostile. Whereas some people like to push limits, some people don't. Yes, I like my photos, but I'll always kind of be respectful and avoid any unnecessary confrontations with the locals, really.
And we'll close with what's the secret to being a successful travel trivia impresario, perhaps is the term, and how would you do it so the same person doesn't win over and over and over again?
Yeah, I mean, this has been a lockdown thing actually, so it got quite big and quite popular, but I set up something called TTC. I know it sounds a little bit like one of the traveling clubs, TCC, but yeah, TTC, which is Travel Trivia Club. So it was kind of bringing together 15 EPS members every Saturday from 6 different continents. So that was nice to have the mix across the continents. And I hosted the first one, but then we took it in turns of having a different quiz master each week, and it was great. It was almost like it was very knowledgeable, but it was also like adding to your travel bucket list at the same time in terms of. I think we finished off the weekend just gone with episode number 12, and I think Debjeet won 10 or 11 of the 12. There was a few people that I would have liked to have taken part that couldn't make it due to time differences. Gina Morello, I'd have liked to seen Gina get involved. She's I'll hold my hands up. Gina is my EPS crush. She probably doesn't know that, but yeah, she's she's very attractive. But yeah, it was logical that Debjeet would be winning majority of the quizzes. He's I know you've had him on here previously, and he's just exceptional. But it was good. Boris Kester in the Netherlands. He's extremely knowledgeable. He's obviously completed the 197. Tudor Clee, he's completed the 197 in New Zealand. There's a lot of extremely knowledgeable people on there. It was just great to share knowledge, and I think it certainly kept a lot of people entertained during lockdown, really.
And Gina's watching, so and I do now, LOL. And and you said
I wasn't sure Gina would be listening, but I'm sure Anya will be will be having a pop at me later.
And you said you added to your bucket list with the trivia, so we'll close the one or two that really jumped to the top of your bucket list out of the trivia challenge.
I would say more a region. I'd like to see more of Alaska and more of the US. I spent 4 months living in New Jersey before I came to Dubai, and that 4-month stint in New Jersey perhaps really set me off on my travels. But in terms of bucket list, probably a lot of the normal ones. You've got the salt flats in Bolivia. Venezuela, Angel Falls. There's a lot of South America I've not done. There's a lot of I've not been to a single country in Central America. I've kind of been purposely trying to save very attractive regions that offer a lot. But yeah, for one thing, I'd probably say the salt flats. I know it's very mainstream, but I would like to visit the salt flats and Machu Picchu in Peru as well.
Fantastic. We hope that's soon possible. And thank you for joining us tonight, Adam.
Cool. Awesome. Cheers for inviting me on.